sneak peek. So we're about to get started. So for this semester, we'll be doing a series on Romans. Something you can see that in one direction, you see sin, vanity, and the law. And then the other direction, you see freedom and transformation. The only variation to this is that for the month of February, we will be doing a truncated series on what is called the matters of the heart/flesh, which will make more sense as time goes on. So, starting off in Romans chapter 1. If you have your Bible app or anything near you, you can look in Romans chapter 1, but the verses will also be on the screen so you can see it as well. So, for Romans, really to start off, we need to know who actually wrote Romans, and that's Paul the Apostle. And he's, how I mentioned, he's the author of the letter to Romans. Paul was an apostle of Jesus Christ, which an apostle means a sent one, but one who actually got their message directly from Jesus. And I'm kind of oversimplifying it, but got his message directly from Jesus and had the authority to share with others, and also to make sure that the message was staying pure as it was being shared as well. Paul was a Jewish Pharisee, and with the Jewish Pharisees, basically they were ones who kept the law very strictly. The law was the moral code of the time. So most of us know the 10 Commandments, but there was actually 600 plus laws that Paul was of the strictest sect that was actually keeping these laws. So if you thought of somebody who was following the law very strictly, who was following the moral code very strictly, it was Paul. He knew everything to do, everything not to do, and he did everything he was supposed to do. And when he didn't, he actually offered up a sacrifice to make sure he was remaining blameless himself. Paul then had an encounter with Jesus Christ where he was one who was killing Christians, or who was declaring that Christians could be killed. And now, after having that encounter with Jesus Christ, he was actually turned into a believer in Jesus as well. So that's really who's writing this message. He's writing to a body of Christians, early Christians, who actually he never met. So think about, if you're writing something to people who you never met, it better be something important or they're putting it down. So everything that he wrote in this actual book is very important for us as believers to understand. And if we don't believe in God, it's also good for us to understand who is God, what is happening in this world, and what has God done to reveal his plan to this world as well, if any. So starting off with Romans 1, so we're going to be reading verse 16 through 25. It says, "For I'm not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God for salvation to everyone who believes, to the Jew first and also to the Greek. For it is the righteousness of God revealed from faith to faith. For it is written, the righteous shall live by faith. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. For what can be known about God is plain to them, because God has made it known or shown it to them. For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world, in the things that have been made, so that they are without excuse. For although they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks to him, but became futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Claiming to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for the images resembling mortal man, birds, and animals, and creeping things. Therefore, God gave them up to their lusts of their hearts, to impurity, to the dishonoring of their bodies among themselves, because they had exchanged the truth about God for a lie, and worshiped and served the creature rather than Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen." So that's a lot. Y'all probably like, what was all that we just read? And we're about to have a chance just to see some of that again. So just to starting off with the gospel. What is the gospel? So something that Paul says in the beginning, of the verses that we read. He says, "For I'm not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God for salvation for everyone who believes, to the Jew first, and also to the Greek. For in it the righteousness of God is revealed from faith to faith, as the righteous shall live by faith." If you think about it, there's not a lot of things, at least for myself, there's a lot of things that I would say if I had to do, I was ashamed of. There's not many things that we are not ashamed of. We're usually not ashamed of things that are like look good on us. But I think about like, this is a gospel that actually changed Paul's life. So why is he saying that he's actually ashamed? Why is he saying that he's not ashamed? Sorry. Why is he saying that he's not ashamed of this gospel? Because he's saying that it's salvation for everyone who believes. In another place, he actually says that this is of first importance. If you're saying something is of first importance, it's the most important thing that you can share with somebody. To really understand the gospel, we need to know the problem, the solution, and our response. So the problem is that we've fallen short of God's standard. If you talk to anybody, and you can raise your hand if this is true for you, a lot of people would say they're not perfect. Or you can raise your hand if you're perfect. Okay, just checking. If you are, please let me know. Let us know in the comments below so we can talk to you and know your secret. But for a lot of us who say we're actually not perfect, we oftentimes know that there's a perfect standard, but how do we know there's a perfect standard? If it was just the case that the perfect standard still allowed for imperfections, which is contradiction, we would just operate based off of as if we were the most right, or we ourselves were the most right. But we know somehow there's a perfect standard that's beyond us. That standard actually applies to God. So if you think about the fact that if God has a perfect standard and he set forth that standard for us to actually follow in, then us not meeting that standard is actually us falling short of his standard. I feel like we all know that we all are like, we're not perfect. But what does that actually mean? So if you think about it, the standard for us to actually, like a lot of us talk about heaven or what will be after this life, for the standard for us to actually get into heaven is perfection. There's nothing that's lower. You can't just be a little bad. There can't be nothing that's a little bit wrong. The standard is actually perfection. And the problem a lot of times is that we try in our own efforts to be perfect, even though we know we're not perfect. That literally doesn't make sense. If we're not perfect, how can we be perfect? And also, if the standard is perfection for heaven, who's about to make it? Because it's not me in my own power. But in that, there's something for us where we see that God has actually made a way for us, which we'll talk about. So I remember, I'm gonna tell y'all a little bit about my history. I remember freshman year, I had a calculus class, my second semester that I took. Don't judge me. I ended the semester with a D+. I tried and I tried. My teacher, he used to teach with his back to us and would never look at us. So I was always like, I mean, can he at least like look at us while he's explaining? Like, this stuff doesn't make sense. At the end of the semester, there was nothing that I could do in my own power to actually pass the class. I needed a C-, and I ended up getting a C-. But at first, I was like, there's literally nothing I can do. Just like, I feel like everybody knows on this call, if you've ever had a class that you failed, there's nothing you can do in your own power. There has to be an intervention outside of you that actually makes it such that you can actually pass the class. There was an intervention on my behalf that actually allowed me to pass the class. But that's just one example. If that's not clear for you, we'll go to another example. Does anybody know what this is? Okay. So this is called a riptide. If you know about riptides, so to tell you a little bit more about myself, I used to try to swim when I was younger, and I almost drowned twice. In my own power, I can't swim. If we feel like, some of us might be like, oh, we're better swimmers. A riptide, I think it moves at like 8 seconds or 8 something per second. It's basically faster than an Olympic swimmer can swim. When you're in a riptide, there's nothing that you can do that will actually get you out of the situation that you're in. In fact, this is what they tell people in a riptide to do. How do you escape a riptide? Stay afloat, yell for help, swim parallel to the shore, and don't exhaust yourself by trying to fight the current. This is what a lot of us look like in life when we try to live perfect by ourselves. Most of us, when we're like, oh, I'm not trying to be perfect, we're just trying to stay afloat. For the rest of us, it's like we're trying to actually exhaust ourselves. I don't even know what it looks like to swim parallel. You're still not making it to land, even if you swim parallel. You actually need outside intervention. So yell for help. Like, God has actually given us a way for help. So the actual solution, if you think about it, God came down in the flesh for us, lived the life that we were supposed to live, died the death we were supposed to die. And on the third day, he rose again, proving that he was the Son of God. He's offering that gift of eternal life, that gift of entering into the place where only people who are supposed to be perfect are allowed. He's offering that gift to us, and he's asking us to receive it by turning from our own ways. If that's not enough proof for you, we'll keep going. So, but our response actually from there is actually to receive what he's saying in faith. What faith is saying is that I can't do it myself, but I trust in the one who can. It's simple. I cannot do it myself, but I trust in the one who can. That's when you look back in the verse and it's like, for in it, the righteousness of God is revealed. Righteousness is like right standing with God. God himself is the perfect standing, perfect standard. So if you think about it, God's righteousness shows the gap between him and us. That gap is not one that can be bridged. There's nothing we can do to bridge it. So our response is to receive it by faith and turning from our own ways and trusting in him. But some people answer this and they're actually like, well, how can we actually know that God has revealed himself? How do we know that God is real? How do we know that God cares? All these things God has revealed, and the verse actually shows that to us. This verse says to us, for the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. For what can be known about God is plain to them. What can be known about God is plain to them because God has shown it to them. For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in things that have been made, so that they are without excuse. They are without excuse. That is an interesting statement that's there. So going back to that, God has revealed himself. So if you think about, if you want to know any type of deep information about somebody, you usually have to ask them about it. So let's say if you couldn't like look up people on Facebook, you couldn't look up people on Twitter, all these things. The only way you can know something, even as simple as somebody's name, is to ask them. If somebody came up to me and was like, "What's up, John?" I'm not responding. Actually, I might respond. I might say something. Never mind. So if somebody comes to me and says, John, that's not my name. So I actually have to tell them something about myself. They can't just assume that they know. A lot of times our posture towards God, or what we try to say, the universe, we try to guess what we think is happening. We try to guess what we think is actually going on. Newsflash, it's not the universe. The universe had a beginning. God did not. Newsflash, you didn't create yourself. You're not about to become a God because you had a beginning. God did not. But you think about, how do we actually know that? God has revealed himself even in a general way to this world. So how I just said, the universe had a beginning. The universe didn't create itself. So you need an uncaused cause who can actually put out the universe, because nothing can't create something. Even if you're like, well, it could have been all this. All of those things that you will list out have a beginning. You need one without a beginning who there's no other beside him who can actually put forth something. So a lot of times we actually suppress that truth because it's actually hard. I remember I used to suppress the truth in myself because it's like a lot of times, how I mentioned, the truth is actually hard. So I'll give y'all another example. Y'all getting everything about my early life in college. Don't judge me after this. Please, what happened here stays here. Don't tell nobody about this. But I remember I was in one of my classes. It was called the biological basis of behavior. And I was a freshman in that class. Everybody else was a junior and a senior. Our teacher told us not to cheat. I thought about what I knew in that class. Because it was hard to try to pass the test, I suppressed the truth of what he told me to not cheat, don't bring nothing into the class. I had my answer sheet under and still failed the test. I literally had the answer sheet under and still failed the test. A lot of times, everything that can be known about God has actually been revealed to us. If you want more information, look at the mountains. Go out and look at the stars if there's not pollution above you. Go out and actually look over into what we think, the universe. Look at all these things. It shows the glory of God, that he actually created those things. There's actually a verse in Hebrews where it talks about the fact that not only has God revealed himself generally, he's actually revealed himself specifically through his son, Jesus. In the verse, it says, he's the radiance of the glory of God and the exact imprint of his nature. If you don't think that is enough to look out and see that God is real, look at what he specifically revealed about himself. The same way that I said that I can't in my own self just be like, oh, or somebody can't come up to me and it's like, oh, John, what's up? In the same way, I can't just try to guess about God because he's actually revealed something about himself. All guesses will end up wrong if we're not looking at what he specifically revealed about himself. But the problem for us oftentimes gets worse, because even with hearing all this, a lot of times some of us are like, I hear you, but this or but that. And a lot of times it's because we have our own gods. We wouldn't want another God who dethrones the ones that are already in our lives. So this last verse, a little bit long, and I know I'm giving y'all the fire hose version of this message, but it says, although they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks to him. So even the people who knew him didn't honor him or give thanks to him. But they became futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Claiming to be wise, they became fools, and exchanged the glory of God for the image resembling mortal man, birds, and images, and creeping things. Therefore, God gave them up in their lust of their hearts to impurity, to the dishonoring of their bodies among themselves, because they exchanged the truth about God for a lie, and worship and serve the creature rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. That is us. A lot of times we have another God that's in our life. It's not actually the true God. Even that statement in itself shows that there should be no other, the true God. A lot of us are probably like, I don't have any images of crawling things. I'm not talking about your stuffed animals either, if you have an image of a bird or something. But it's a little bit deeper than that. So we've chosen our own gods, and we actually get significance from these created things. And we've also given allegiance to them as well. An idol is anything that takes the place of God. To make it more specific, if you're still like, I don't understand, these things can be relationships, it can be work, it can be your own image, it can be family, it can be achievements. And the list goes on and the list goes on. But for those of you, if you're replacing God for something that has been created, I have a question. My question for you is, will your God sacrifice itself for you like you have sacrificed yourself for or to it? And for me, this, like, I'm saying this message because this cuts me at my heart. A lot of the things that I give myself to will never sacrifice themselves for me. I wouldn't even sacrifice myself for somebody I like. It's not everybody. I would for some people. But you just think about, like, really, I want everybody to ponder that question. The things that motivate you the most in life, the things that you think are the highest pinnacle of success for you, will that thing sacrifice itself for you? Will your job sacrifice itself for you? Will your relationship sacrifice itself for you? Will your achievements sacrifice itself for you? Will trying to please your family sacrifice itself for you? Those things cannot do it. It's not even that they won't. They don't have the power to do so. So to end us off, I just want to tell y'all my own story of the gods in my own life. My gods were comfort, approval, and control. Approval, people pleasing. I made a god out of making sure that everybody thought I had a good image. I'm speaking in the past tense, but really, a lot of this has even bled into now. I made a god out of my own comfort, that I thought that having success and being able to, like, straight out of college, being able to buy a car, buy a house, all these things, I thought that, not that any of these things are bad things, I thought that that was the pinnacle of my life. So it became my God. Approval, which I just talked about. Control, trying to control the image of my life, trying to control the way that everything looked in my life, trying to control the people in my life so that they can do the things that I wanted to get the things I wanted in life. Those were my gods. But in a moment, I had a radical apprehension with the God of this universe. He showed me the webs of lies, deceits that I got myself into because of my gods. I cannot get myself out of it. But he sacrificed himself on my behalf, the one who was unworthy, and actually showed me that I can receive a gift from him that I don't deserve. For me, it happened, I was in ENC. Shout out to ENC if you ain't know. But I was in ENC at University of Maryland in undergrad. And for me, it took somebody who was a coworker telling me, hey, you should come out to this Bible study. I was like, why would I come out to Bible study? I'm already going to church. Even my idea of trying to say that church would actually save me became an idol as well. I actually needed the one who I was supposed to go to church for to save me so that I can actually go to church for the right reason. God himself had a radical encounter with me where my life changed. And now it doesn't make sense to live for anyone else but him. To return the only one and true God to his place, so that the true one who deserves worship can be worshiped. For y'all, I'm telling y'all, if you have not received him, if you have not received our risen Lord, because he's the one who rose from the dead, you have an opportunity to do so as long as there's breath in your body. For those of us who have received him, we have an opportunity to return to him afresh today. That any idol that's gotten in our way, we have time to actually say, you know what, God, I've been serving this other thing, but I actually need to serve you. What I didn't tell y'all in the beginning is that Romans 1 is about me. Romans 1 is actually about my own sin, my own unrighteousness, my own idols. But it's also a story of how God's gospel has saved me. So that's it. That's all I got for y'all.
I see you.
So real quick, what we're about to do. So this message, however it sat with you, what we're about to do, we're about to break out into breakout rooms, and we really want to pray for each other. So there's a couple things that you could pray for. You could pray if you're like, I actually have never experienced God. I don't know like who he is. I actually kind of don't believe in him. You can pray for God to reveal himself deeper to you. If you do believe in him, you can pray for God to reveal himself to you. Y'all can also pray for each other's needs, and also pray for God to reveal what idols are in our lives, what things have taken the place of him. It doesn't have to be in any order, but for God to reveal himself to you, that's number one, in a greater way. To pray for each other's needs, so y'all can express what needs, what prayer requests you have, and also to pray for God to reveal some of those idols as well. Make sense?